So, I saw this really interesting game on Twitter called Duel Corp and decided to participate in its playtest. What really drew me in was how nice the game looked, since I tend to be somewhat of a sucker for low-poly stuff with good textures. There was only one class available in the playtest, and it was the Knight. No huge issue for me, since I prefer to cut people down directly instead of skulking in the shadows or wave my hands to summon a fireball or something. I started the game and noticed that Duel Corp tried to implement this interesting combination between Dark Souls and Mount and Blade. I actually somewhat like the idea of using directional mouse movement, since it gives me extra control on how my attacks should be, and I can see the potential of this approach. The problem starts when there's more than one enemy, as the WASD keys do not work like how Mount and Blade does. In games like For Honor, where regular soldiers can't really interrupt your attacks, being reliant on lock-ons to be able to strafe left and right and also backpedal is not that big of a problem, since the most amount of enemies that's going to be able to interrupt you is 4 in Dominion matches. And even then, unless your teammates are highly outclassed or you are insanely unlucky, you would most likely fight 1v1 or 1v2. When you tend to be outnumbered by your enemies like in Mount and Blade, it is within your best interest to backpedal to not be surrounded, since in Mount and Blade Warband, even recruits can interrupt your attacks provided they do enough damage, and the lack of cleaving attacks doesn't help. This is exactly the problem in Duel Corp's combat. You can only have one companion, yet the fights can very well pitch you against 4 enemies at once. It doesn't help that enemy attacks, including projectiles, can pass through other enemies, and even arrows can curve. The direction-based swings and parries doesn't really feel like it adds anything significant to the combat so far. Luckily, you can somewhat avoid this part of the whole combat by equipping a shield, which only costs 80 souls. If the game lets you control your character's orientation with the mouse, and let your movement keys strafe and backpedal instead of walking and facing towards a particular direction when not locked onto something, I'd find the combat far more enjoyable. This game is solid enough for me graphics and sound-wise. I enjoyed how nice and bright the place looked, and the spirit that levels you up looks rather adorable. I do have high hopes for this game, and look forward to seeing how it would develop. That's all I have to say after killing the last boss of the current playtest. If the video was amusing enough, consider subscribing, and as always, have a great time.